This is Pardon the Pummel, Episode 3 with myself, Dan, and Vrograg. We are, unfortunately, without Nixxiom today. The good news is he's not here because his wife just gave birth, so hopefully everyone's happy and healthy. Congratulations to all of them. With that being said, though, Vrograg and I were talking just now as we were leading up to the recording of this episode, preparing content and whatnot, and we actually started just having one of the conversations. I don't know how many of you have done podcasting before, but when you hit that point of we want to talk about this stuff so much that we just start talking about this stuff without having hit the record button, which is a really good slippery slope to have. You know this episode's going to be a ton of fun. We'll get into whether or not it actually is in a moment here. But first off, Vrograg, happy Friday, because this is airing on a Friday. We're not recording it on a Friday. This is airing on a Friday. Happy Friday to you.
Oh, happy Friday to you as well. And of course, congratulations as well to Nixxiom expecting a new little one. That's very exciting. And, you know, Dan, you don't need to feel any shame. I mean, I don't know about your age, but I know that men of a certain age just really feel a primal urge to talk in a podcast fashion. It happens. It's a natural thing. It's okay.
Once you get into your 30s, yeah, it kind of just happens.
It does. And you know what? I will say genuinely, because we did talk about this. I'm like, you know, I do genuinely feel like this is a under-examined facet of Turtle Wow that we're touching upon.
Oh, yeah. So today on Pardon the Pummel, all of our topics are going to be about the economy and money.
That's right. Yeah.
For better or worse. Now, this is...
Yeah, you can listen to this while you're farming.
Oh, my Lord.
It's really meta.
Yeah. This is a topic of conversation that Vrograg and I have... I feel like we've been wanting to have on the air for a long time. We just have never gotten around to it. But the fact of the matter is that both of us are kind of gearheads when it comes to the economy. And we both look at it just a bit differently. And then Vrograg has this like gigantic machine of numbers.
Yeah, I have a good friend of mine wrote up a script. I use wowauctions.net shout outs. You know, most people can't do market scans like you might expect to in Classic.
Mm-hmm.
Most of that's because 1.12 architecture and server dev said, like, please stop DDoSing our server from within the server. Yeah. So the best way to do it, if you need like market prices on demand, is use WoW auctions. But I have a script that grabs all of those hourly price points. And I've been doing it now for like over 2 years at this point. So I have tons of data that I've been collecting. And I use it for my news programs, of course, too.
And you know, Orgrim Doomhammer bless us for those. Thank goodness.
Yes. I mean, there are so many small bits of like ephemera. There's little parts, these little micro interactions that happen between the community, the team, different communities interacting with one another on large scale and small scale that are happening all the time. And sometimes like the numbers themselves can actually like tell a story. And that's what I find so fascinating about watching auction house prices.
So I guess you're getting into it here. The big question of what, and this is our first topic. we did write down topics, by the way. The first topic is, what is the economy? What is the market? Because you can look at a server and say, okay, the auction house is obviously the market. That's the market. But you're then completely obliterating so many other parts of what goes into a server economy in a market. So in your words, what is the market or the economy?
So, you know, I'm not a Econ 101 professor, but in my estimation, when you look at it through World of Warcraft, The economy is essentially a base set of scarcity and demand fighting against supply and gold availability. And there are things that people need, especially in vanilla era, that are either hard to get and time consuming to get. And people will often use gold as this sort of this token to be like, I have my consumables, but I don't have this one. So I'm paying gold as a convenience to get this other thing. But really, largely, that's what most players think the economy is. I think it's much larger because the economy also involves this sort of discussion that's going on between the players and the developers, because Turtle Out is a living game. Things have changed over time, certainly with the economy. And as that's happened, it's also become a discussion of the developers noting where there's pain points in the economy and trying to alleviate that. And then, of course, if anyone knows about economies, anytime you tweak stuff or mess around with it, there's always knock-on effects that you don't expect.
Oh, yeah. And I think it's really important to state that while there's all these supply that are available, whether you're talking about raid consumables, you're talking about materials, you're talking about refined materials that take an action to make. So let's say you're talking about the difference between an arcane crystal and a thorium bar and an arcanite bar. There's a big difference between those two. You have all of these different things that are functioning as part of the market, but then we also have the liquid asset that we all agree on, gold. And then we all function using gold as a standard of measure versus all of these other things that are participating in the market.
Yeah, and it's top down, in many respects, in like a world like vanilla WoW or retail WoW, like the lower level, what we would consider lower level materials, like let's say like linen cloth. A lot of times the only value those have is for people that are leveling up tailoring. But bringing back in the scope of like developers change stuff and it changes things, a hotly demanded item for people who are leveling are tents. Tents require linen. To go get linen, you have to go to lower level areas and farm it. And it can be done relatively easily, but people can put linen on the auction house and now there's an added value to it. So even from like the most lowly level item all the way up to the top, there's all these values that the community can put on it, whether they put that there organically or artificially from people buying out all the stock and then, jacking up prices. That's what the economy is, right? It's that discussion between what the players want and what the game is delivering.
And there's another weird aspect, a really odd aspect that World of Warcraft kind of puts into play with this kind of thing. And we do see this to a certain extent with like real world markets, but the concept of convenience. And convenience has a very strong monetary, I'm going to say, tag tied to it. So you brought up linen cloth, for example. Hardcore enabled servers, so whether you're talking about Turtle in general or the hardcore like retail, classic or vanilla servers, they don't have this weird kind of convenience aspect to a certain extent because people are constantly leveling new characters. There are constantly level 1, level 10 characters coming up who are farming naturally because they're questing and gathering linen cloth. On non-hardcore servers, stuff like linen and wool has this immense convenience tag attached to it because no one's really making new characters and just going out into the world and leveling. They're getting them power leveled. They're getting them boosted. That doesn't get them the resources to level up, let's say, tailoring or first aid. So suddenly you have a lack of supply at times on linen cloth or wool cloth, for example, and the price jets upwards because
Yep.
people are making alts but not going out and gathering at all to level them. So
Yeah.
it's a very strange thing to say what is the supply and what is the demand, because the concept of convenience can suddenly like twerk that in a way that you don't ever expect.
Yes, that's exactly what happens. And I think what's interesting within even just that, you have these places where people want a thing, and then the market starts going up for an item. The market itself begins to almost act like a secondary quest market, if you can think about it that way.
Yeah.
Where you're looking around on the auction house and you're like, huh, wow, well, that really went up in value. Huh. Well, like I know how to get that. Maybe I should go get some and put them on the auction house. Like it literally acts like that. So, if you're lost and drifting, you're like, oh, I need some gold. You're like, well, wait a second. I know how to do it. Like, I also like that aspect of WoW economies, where it can generate like an incentive for players to do something that they might not have even thought of doing beforehand.
And this kind of, you also have, speaking of quests, you have then normal items that are just usable as someone has crafted them, but then are also sometimes used for quests in the world, which attaches that odd value to them as well. So
oh yeah,
everyone's going to think of the Badlands quest where they have to get the gyronometron and the frost oil and
or
the health
deadly
potions and whatnot.
blunderbuss, the deadly blunderbuss for the war song quest.
If people are properly rolling horde, at least, hopefully.
But I know that one. It's like, outside of that, there's no reason to make that gun. Like it's kind of a it's kind of a non-starter. But because of that quest, like it's always good to make a few and throw them up on the auction house. Like, you don't lose out on anything, especially if you're crafting them and you have the recipe for it.
And we see that also with not raid consumables, but items that drop in raids that you need for stuff outside of raid or for raid later on. The frost etched runes, I think they're called, from Nax, for example.
The frozen runes,
yeah. And the arcane essences from Karazhan.
Oh yeah. Arcane essences. You have all the coins and bijous from ZG. You have all the idols out of 8Q40. Like, those are big money items, and there are some raid teams that they don't need them, but there's other teams that are killing for them. But a lot of those raid teams are like, we know what you have to do to get these, and there's only so many on the auction house. And sometimes it can put a squeeze on some people, and other times there's just too many. And the market price will drop.
We're already getting into the next subject. So before we do that, where we talk about scarcity and balancing in markets, and talk a little bit about what Turtle has done in regards to that, we're going to take a short timeout. We're going to take a quick break. And then when we come back, that's what we're hitting next. It's the market episode. It's the Economic Discussions 101. Part of the Pummel. And we were talking about this earlier. A lot of you are probably going to have some fun with this. There's going to be some of you that are like, they need to stop talking about money. Please stop talking about money. I'm sorry. That's our episode today.
I don't apologize.
I don't feel bad at all. We're having so much fun with this already. So we'll be right back. More Part in the Pummel coming up right after this. This is Part in the Pummel. Second, I'll say round 2. I was going to say second edition. That doesn't really work here. Round 2. Round 2
doesn't sound like a fight. We're not fighting.
We're not fighting. No, we're just kind of nerding out today.
Yes, exactly.
I love how you said, like, in our discussion, Vrograg, I love how you said earlier in the discussion when we were planning this, you have enough data, you're ready to devil's advocate anything here.
I mean, the thing is that I because I've done news for Turtle WoW for so long, I've always had like a little market segment. Because I've been covering this stuff for so long, I have heard every argument for and against everything under the sun involving auction houses, supplies, reagents, how much stuff costs, everything under the sun. And so when you mentioned it, I'm like, I could argue anything at this point.
You're just like you're throwing your armor on as fast as you can, like, oh, we fighting.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe Round was correct.
We'll see. I don't think we're going to disagree on a ton. We may approach things differently, but I think we both really like to use data-based approaches on things.
I mean, you have to. You have to because there's just too much to keep track of. And, you need to have a good data source to keep track of stuff for you. So you can be like, hey, I feel this way. And then see if the numbers, refute what you're saying or if the numbers confirm what you're saying.
Yes, exactly. And that's like we started talking about it at the end of the previous segment, but what you just said is a great way to really step into balancing the markets. This is a really touchy subject for some people. This is a very delicate dance that has had to be done, but also absolutely vital. What is balancing the markets, though?
I mean, there are so many aspects of it, and it wouldn't be a Pardon the Pummel if I didn't take a swipe at Blizzard, right? Because
absolutely, yes, by all means.
Turtle WoW has done. I mean, sorry, Blizzard has left the bar so low as far as things to do against RMT. RMT is like hyperinflation for every single economy, and what I will say about it is you need to have active people working against RMT to prevent inflation. And if you don't believe me, I'm sure many people have seen this. If you've played on classic servers, if you've played on, Seasons of Discovery, on these retail Blizzard servers where there is almost no stopping of botting. Those economies, look at their value of Black Lotus. Look at any of them right now, and you will literally grow pale because you're like, oh, we have it so good. And that takes a conscious effort by the team to choose to combat it. Now, Blizzard has a reason, of course, as any corporation would, because they make money off of subscriptions from bots that create
that bot's
going
to give us another $15 after we ban them, guaranteed.
Well, exactly. Yeah. And so there's no incentive for Blizzard to stop it. Now, for Turtle, they do have an incentive because no one's paying a subscription, right? People are either happy with the server and they're donating, or they're not. And because people hate botting, they need to do what they can to stop botting. It's not going to be 100%. There's still going to be edge cases and instances of it's happening.
There is no perfect solution ever.
Right. But they actually have motivation to stop it. And because of that, it's largely being fought, which I think is an amazing thing to do for any WoW economy.
And in regards to what we're talking about here when it comes to not just balancing the markets, but then what we look at when it comes to scarcity or availability of product, I think one of the biggest things that Turtle has done is made it so many alchemy consumables last through death now.
I mean, there's that. They've done tons of stuff to make herbs more available in a multitude of different ways. You have to remember that this is built on 1.12 client. The purview of one of the old vanilla servers was not for like in the case of Nordinar to have like close to 10,000 players on at a time. That wasn't what original vanilla was like. They're not built for that. There isn't enough Black Lotuses to go around, right? So the Turtle team recognizes that and then takes steps to make some of the things that players need more available. Now, it's not perfect, but those steps, rather than this strange adherence to vanilla values like Original Classic did, where Black Lotuses would cost hundreds of gold. Now you have a much more modest, like, yeah, it costs like 10, 50, I didn't even check the most recent pricing, but
you don't have the most recent data in front of you. How dare you?
Well, I didn't know what I was going to talk about quite yet, but I can look at it.
Oh no! Why did I challenge him? Why did I open my mouth?
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is, but but I mean that makes a huge difference, right? The fact that you don't necessarily need a herbalist to go get Plague Bloom, right? You can do Lasherums and get Plague Bloom, right?
Yeah.
The fact that Blasted Lands reagents are dropping at 80% on mobs that are hyper spawning, that's a huge difference. The fact that Eco over in Winter Spring drops at a higher rate, it doesn't drop in group, but it drops at a higher rate per mob, means most people can, like, they can still do their farming, but it's not like a queue waiting for people trying to toxically tag stuff back and forth. Like, it's very doable.
Oh yeah. So for context, I was playing on the 20th anniversary servers for a while. Trying to farm my eco for raids was impossible. It legitimately, as a tier 2 geared out Fury Warrior, impossible. Absolute nightmare.
Yeah, it's pretty tough out there in the streets of a Blizzard server. I think they definitely, Blizzard does stuff well, but their market, so to say, they're very laissez-faire. They kind of keep their hands off, and then they passively do stuff that ruins it. And I was mentioning it before with, like, how botting is an issue. One thing to kind of interject here from sort of a real world, and I try not to talk about real world stuff too much, but in economies where you can have a central bank print money, that is in some ways similar to how if you have 1,000 bots on a server that keep killing the same mob and then vendoring the gray drops, the difference there is negligible. Like, you are creating gold, you're creating money, and that goes into the economy, which makes everyone's money worth less. Doesn't make it worthless, it just makes your gold worth less. And which means everyone needs to farm more.
Would you say that was the reasoning behind what Turtle did with Lashers then, where initially, like, on retail, well, I say retail, but on classic and vanilla servers, the reason you Lasher farm is because the drops off of Lashers are worth ridiculous amounts of money. So, like, insane amounts of money. On Turtle, you farm Lashers because they drop herbs, like you said earlier. Is that the big reason behind that choice, do you think?
So, I mean, it's a bit of a history lesson. All right, I'll try to be brief with it. Back in 2022,
Vrograg tries to be brief. 2025.
I'm gonna try. Okay, so in 2022, when the server was still like 2K pop, and that was like a big day when it had 2,000, and it was just Northernar. Even back then, people were noticing. They're like, "Hey, there's like teams that are trying to do raids. Black Lotuses are actually really hard to come by." And there were members of the community that were like, we really need some help with this Black Lotus situation. And the solution they came up with was, I think it was anything that was at Dream Foil level of herbalism or higher had a 1 or maybe a 2% chance to also drop a Black Lotus. All that did was create more Black Lotuses, which obviously dropped the price because there was just more of them than maybe people needed. And like that one small move, it's a good microcosm of the team noticing a pain point for players and literally a limitation of the game, making that adjustment, and then players can like breathe a little bit more easily,
That makes sense. And we're kind of getting into the scarcity side of the conversation here. And that's something that, especially with the alchemy change, I was actually really concerned with, because my first thought was, okay, the profession that I put so much time and effort into is this going to see a drop in value? Because
no way.
it ended up not. It ended up not at all.
No,
I was
because you're
specifically
the only
worried about
person who can
mongoose
make black
potions then.
lotuses.
What's that?
Like herbalists are the only ones who can get black lotuses.
Yeah.
Black lotuses are always going to be valuable. And so because of that, herbalism's always going to have value. Now, anyone can go do lashers if you can. I think there's a couple classes that might struggle with it more than others, right? But also with lashers,
how are hunters good for lasher farming?
I mean, they can do it. Full stop. They can technically. If you do, I'm just learning hunter, but I'm pretty sure what I've heard is you can go deep survival. Remember, capstone of survival nowadays, you can drop traps in combat, which means you drop the AoE fire trap. And remember, survival also has carve, which is a melee AoE. It's kind of like multi-shot. You just do that, and then you pop deterrents so they don't smack you down too quickly. And you're wearing mail armor, so you're actually going to last longer than you think. It's totally doable.
Yeah, hunter is the only class that I'm like, wait, could they?
Yeah. Shamans are actually one that actually struggle with it a lot because of the nature immunity.
That makes sense. Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Now you can do it, but you have to like go deep in enhancement, get enough defensive stuff, and you have to rely on your fire totems to do all the AoE damage for you. I mean, you'll get it done, but you just can't use Earth Shock. You can't use Chain Lightning, but you can get it done.
That's pretty rough. That is pretty rough. Because whenever I needed to just clear my head, I would just hop into Holy Nova, spec on my priest, and just go to town.
Yeah, there's like a threshold of int you need to do enough Holy Novas to kill them. It's
very low. That threshold is very low.
But I mean, getting that done, even though lashers now have herbs on them that are in hot demand, or used to be in hot demand, now the price on them has fallen considerably. But one other change with the lashers, right? You were mentioning how in vanilla and on classic servers, those lashers, the reason you did them, it wasn't for the herbs really. Like you might get a few, but the reason you did it was because the gray drops they had were amazing gold per hour value.
They were bonkers in price.
So that's one of those things where I mentioned before how having things like that will actually make everyone's gold worth less because you're creating gold, you're not creating supply. And now on Turtle WoW, you're not creating as much gold, but you're creating more supply. So it's up to the player that like, hey, I'm either going to use this or I will take excess and put it on the auction house. And that helps the economy much more than just blindly farming something for gold so you have enough gold to buy, either your reagents or your consumables.
And I'm sure especially with the fact that supply of herbs increased multiple times between different patches and adjustments, some people were probably not super happy about that, because the fact of the matter is that for herbalists, the value of what they were doing, let's say per hour, if you want to like make a concrete argument about it, did go down. Yeah. That did happen.
They absolutely did. They absolutely did, and it's been going down for a while, pretty much since that change. And it's been it's not like it's been doomsday for herbalists, right?
No.
Because there's also the whole market of making the consumable and then having a markup on that, and that's a whole other ball of wax. And also, that stuff still has value. So even if you're not getting the gold like you were before, the reagents you're getting has value. And there's other places where they've made some of these market concessions, I'll call them, to smooth out population problems. Like I mentioned blasted lands buffs. Right?
Let's pause button here because after the break we're going to be talking about concepts of gold inflation and gold sinks, and I think that's exactly what you're about to go into.
I love this stuff, and like,
it's so good. It's so good.
I love chiding the team when they've earned it, but in general, most of what they've done, we've talked about how the economy is in some ways a discussion between the players in the game. What the developers have done has made that conversation just better. It's just a better conversation.
There's more depth. I think the right word is depth. They've added more depth to the conversation.
And for many people, this kind of stuff, maybe it doesn't matter that much, but I think for many players it does, because it's an acknowledgement that there are members of the team who also play and also have to deal with this. And many times, we're in the forums, we're in the Discord going, guys, Dream Foil price is getting out of control, and there's many devs that, whether they can say so publicly or not, they're in agreement with us, and they also have metrics of their own to look at that stuff and take corrective action. We all have
our own experience with the game. We all we are each our own perspective, and that's really, really, really important to remember.
Yeah, and scarcity is always going to be something that drives the economy, because even in a perfect world where everyone has, like an equal distribution, like they can get what they need generally, when they do want something, you still have to play the market game, right? Because if you have enough gold, you can just, if there isn't much stock on the auction house, you can just gobble it all up. And then
no comment.
Post it again.
No comment.
Well, it should be noted that this is actually one place where I think it's a bit of a gray area.
Sure.
The team has said in many times that they see that as player and player interaction, and they will not intercede, even though to most people, buying out, every, it's usually something that's smaller market cap, right? So, like a specific type of leather that people need, it's just all gone. And then it's priced again, it's put back up for twice the value. Now, most people say, hey, that's abusive. It is in many respects, but that person who just did that, they took a huge risk, because they don't know if there's some other huge leather whale out there who just has banks of the stuff and is just going to go post it for the price that it was just at. And now that guy's holding the bag. It's a fun game.
I'm not gonna. We need to close the segment out. This segment's gone super long, and I'm not gonna say a dang thing.
All right.
For my own safety, maybe I'll say something in the next segment. But for now, we're gonna take a short time out. Segment 3 of Pardon the Pummel coming up right after this. Segment 3 of Pardon the Pummel. It's go time. I don't know why it's go time. Again, I'm still just really excited to talk about this stuff.
I don't know, man. You really like trying to get like some kind of punchy like catchphrase in there.
So
I admire it.
The idea of Pardon the Pummel came from Pardon the Interruption, if anyone does the sports, obviously. And I love it.
Players famously known for love of sports.
I'm from the Midwest. I love my sports. And I live in New England now, which I love my sports. So it's just the vibe is punchy for me, and that's just what was made. Now, before we get into the concept of gold inflation versus gold sinks, I will make an admission here, and you all are probably going to hate me for it, but what Vrograg was talking about when it came to flipping auction house, like I'll say products or listings, that's how I've made most of my money on Turtle. And a lot of it has actually came from raid consumes, different like limited products, and thick leather.
Yeah,
thick leather.
leather is the one. Thick leather's at an awkward level for leather workers. And yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I've seen that actually happen with thick leather.
I'm also going to.
It might have been you.
So I'm going to let out a little bit of a secret here about thick leather. You should never ever sell thick leather at 1.4 gold or 1.38 gold per stack or less, because a leather worker can take that stack and turn it into headbands and vendor it for a profit.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. I mean, so I know, you talk about flipping products and doing, like, some people will call
doing
it market
evil.
manipulation.
Doing
right?
evil.
So some people call it market manipulation. However, here's the thing. Anytime someone tries doing that, they take a risk. They can end up getting burned. And in many cases, it's literally like in the case of what you just described, it's a market correction, because it's like, no, you think the value of this thick leather is this. It's actually not. And I'm going to now prove that by making a bunch of money off of the money you left on the table. And the most simple example of this, and I know players have seen this in everything.
Mm-hmm.
You have something in your bag and you're going to go put it on the auction house, and you look at its vendor value, and now the vendor value is in your brain. Then you go to the auction house. It's on the auction house for less than it's vendoring. Now, even WoW players can look at that and go, wait, if I just buy it off the auction house, I can vendor it for more than what it's posted. I make a profit. That's a market correction. So like, it's normal. It's natural. And you don't got to feel too bad about it, because there's risk involved. And at the end of the day, the market then reflects what the actual value of an item is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that makes sense. I feel like some people are going to come at me now, and I'm totally okay with that.
Well, I mean, there's a spectrum, right? Because there's stuff like what, playing the game with thick leather, that's one thing, but knowing exactly when there's a raid team that's progging Kara 40, and you know for a fact that they're going to be doing Anomalous for the first time, and you buy out all the greater arcane protection potions and then gouge, I feel like that's on the other end of the spectrum.
I've never done that.
Right.
I've never done.
So I mean, and I've seen it happen. I've
really
literally seen it. I've not only seen it happen live, I've seen it happen with someone in the raid who was posting it. So don't worry.
Wow.
If you think making a couple extra shekels off of people's ignorance is bad, nah, there's much worse out there.
There's so much. Fair enough. And speaking of worse, gold inflation. Boy, do we hate it.
It's terrible. It's terrible. It's part of the game, though, right? When players do quests, they can be given an item. More frequently, they're given a silver or a gold reward for doing a quest. That gold comes out of thin air, and that gold is now part of the economy.
You snap your fingers, you get money. Yay.
Yep. And if you find a mob that has something that's particularly valuable to vendor, you can, you can kill a bunch of them and then vendor all of it. And that gold came from nowhere, and now it's in your pocket. It's part of the economy.
Mages sitting around in Zul'Farrak, we're talking to you.
Yep. And if you do that enough, and now there's a bunch of gold in the economy, and that gold needs to go somewhere. And the thing is that in the aggregate, if everyone does that, that's going to make a Black Lotus that might have been worth 10 gold. Well, now it's worth 15. People have more gold than they know what to do with. And we just talked about market corrections. The market forces are going to notice that. They're going to be like, wow, this all sold out. We need to put up the price a little bit more to slow down because they're cleaning out all of our stock. And literally that's like a good microcosm of like how inflation of gold happens on servers. But there is something developers can do against it.
And there's something that Blizzard did not do against it.
Well, so even though it makes, me sick to even say it, trying to be charitable to Blizzard. In vanilla era,
Oof.
the notions of how much gold was actually working like an economy, I don't think it was very well known. They did have gold sinks back then.
Oh, sure.
And people also didn't know the best ways to farm back then either. They had the Epic Mount, right? That was a big gold sink. And there are things, smaller things like the exalted shoulder enchants from Argent Dawn. Those are like 10 gold. There were things dotted throughout the game that were meant to recapture some of that gold that's generated. Now, flash forward 20 years, many people know many things about this game. And people's ability to make gold is better. People's knowledge of how to do it is better. And so it became incumbent upon the Turtle team to make more gold sinks to fight inflation.
Sure. And to be honest, what I was referencing with Blizzard specifically was over the course of expansions, they continuously upped the amount of liquid assets that were available to even mid-level players. So let's say we're going into Wrath or something. Players still have to level through TBC, and they're getting all this like higher value drops that are coming out of all the trash you're killing as you're questing. It's not really going into anything at the time because over the course of expansions, Blizzard kept lessening the amount of cost that went into mounts and stuff. They were adding certain costs, but then over the course of expansions lessened so people had easier access to it because they felt like people weren't working as hard as they should be.
There's that, and they also had unchecked inflation. Like,
absolutely,
back then they had tons of bots and just mindless farmers who just knew a trick or two, and then would just completely destroy an economy. And
economists hate all these people with this one easy trick,
right? And what ends up happening is they have no choice but to be like, okay, so rather than fix the underlying issue, everything just costs more. But that doesn't fix the issue. That just kicks it down the road more.
And then they even revert that very quickly within an expansion or two.
Yep. It's a little bit like the number crunch system with damage. Over time, because of the way expansions worked, they have to be like what used to be, 100,000 damage. They're like, okay, the numbers are kind of getting silly. We're just going to take a couple decimal points out and just kind of push it down. Again, they didn't really change anything.
The math ain't mathing.
The math ain't mathing. The math's still there, and it's still weird. But it is what it is. But there's a bevy of ways to work against that. And from the developer point of view, not that I'm a developer, but I understand that some things that the Turtle team has done to work against it is have things to spend big amounts of gold on, and I think it has not been the sole reason for it, but it's been a big contributing factor of a more healthy economy on Turtle WoW.
Now, one thing that you brought up, because we're talking between segments and whatnot, was, and this goes into when it comes to gold sinks and things that you spend money on in the economy. Again, I'm using a general term. Yeah. You brought up a couple herbs, specifically Dreamfoil. And when it comes to the concept of pricing and what people are spending their money on, I really want to talk about Dreamfoil for a moment. So if you could just kind of rehash quickly what you were telling me about when it comes to dream foil?
You just told me to do something quickly.
That.
Okay. I said, you told me to do something quickly. And I'm like, well, here we go. So briefly, dream foil is an herb that is used in many, many things and is used in large amounts in those many, many things. Now, specifically talking about dream foil, if I were to look at the price from back in January of 2024, it was under 4 silver a piece. Most recent check-in, it's right now, it's almost a gold. It's almost a gold right now. And how did we get there? Because the amount of dream foil, how much is available for players to pick, right, actually increased. Technically, because now lashers are dropping them more often, and people are now incentivized to go do lashers, where if you're an herbalist, there's dream foil nodes. So, what happened with that? Well, the interesting thing is that dream foil can also act as sort of a metric of how many people are actively doing how many people are doing activities that require dream foil as part of that activity, whether it's PvP and you need some some consumable that needs dream foil, or if you're doing raiding, people are going to want that more and more. And it peaked in, I want to say, June of 2024, when it almost broke 1 gold 10, and then it came down after they made lashers have dream foil. But in the run up to Kara 40, where things like greater arcane protection potion are needed in abundance, it started going up again. So dream foil is fascinating, but within the conversation of how does it affect, inflation and gold sync, it's kind of nice, because dream foil, it technically you can vendor it, right? It doesn't really create gold. It just has a value. It's almost like its own version of currency. And because of that, it doesn't really have a sort of inflationary value on the market as a whole. Instead, it's just a better weather vane for how many people are doing raiding and how many people are actually farming for this stuff. This is why I love having these kind of numbers in front of me. It's a fascinating thing, and hopefully the team notices that dream foil's price is getting out of whack, because these are the kind of metrics you use to if I were a dev, I would probably say we might want to make either dream foil drop more often from lashers, maybe add some nodes around the world, that kind of stuff. You kind of want a light touch, but clearly with the current population, and also I do want to say, I've been mostly speaking about Nordinar when talking about pricing. On Telebim, the population is much smaller, and so their prices are much, much lower. But in a server that almost has 10,000 people on it at one time, you need more dream foil. It's just a fact of life,
And with this in particular, and talking about what people farm and how people acquire things, and I'm not going to even say acquire a consumable or an herb or a weapon, just consume things in a market. The kind of depth that comes from dream foil goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where the turtle devs have added depth to the conversation when it comes to a market. And this is a huge part of that. And that's not saying it's perfect. You are making a very clear argument for, hey, something might need to be adjusted. But the fact that conversation exists, especially on Turtle, is a darn good thing. Is a very, very good thing.
Yeah, it's what I find so funny is that like the players and the developers, we do share one thing in that we're sort of trapped in a vanilla reality, and we both have to live here together. So there are some sort of axioms that I don't think the team would break, and I don't think many players would want them to break. So you actually have to address the problem in sort of sometimes a subtle, sometimes a not so subtle approach, but you have to deal with it within um, the world of the game itself. Now, in some cases, they, for instance, changed how many grave moss are needed for shadow oil.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That was warmly received by the community. However, there's been an interesting knock-on effect from that. Now you only need 2 grave moss to make a shadow oil. You still need 4 fade leaf. Do you know what happened to the price of fade leaf?
I would assume
It went up.
blasted up.
It went up because now people were like, oh, okay, well, I only need this much grave moss. And now they're farming harder for fade leaf. And fade leaf wasn't really adjusted with the Lasher economy update. And right now, at times it can be worth more than grave moss, which is like
mind blowing. Is that accurate?
Right? I can double check the numbers, but I know there's times when the prices are closer than you would think because grave moss is also needed for like fewer things.
Yeah, it's only used in I think 3 or 4 recipes.
Right. Fade leaf, I think, is used in a wider variety of consumables generally.
Yeah.
But it's not like a world where there's rogues using fade leaf to make vanishing powder. That's just insane. You go pickpocket a guy because you don't want to pay fade leaf prices. But it has made a really weird kind of topsy-turvy world where the demand to make a greater shadow protection potion still exists, but now the demand is on a different part of the economy because it still requires 4 fade leaf. And so it's one of those situations where it's like, generally this was a warmly received change to the recipe, but the knock-on effect is that, well, there's still a pretty high demand, and now the supply that's lagging behind is fade leaf.
I do find that, and this kind of goes back to understanding what you farm and how you farm it.
Yes.
Even though there is a struggle for fade leaf in some capacity, I still much prefer farming more fade leaf than more grave moss by a long shot.
I mean, it's as hard as walking around Swamp of Sorrows.
Exactly.
You can do Hinterlands too. I think there's a good amount of nodes, but you can instance farm both grave moss and fade leaf in Scarlet Monastery as well. Not many people know that.
That's fair. I don't like it. Like, the only instance farming I do is with Lashers. God, it took my brain a long time to hit that one. Jesus Christ. Woo! That's the only instance farming I do.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, it's a good use of your time, and even if there's herbs you get that you don't need, you can put those in the auction house. They'll probably find a home. You still get some additional gold back, And you
the amount of Grom's blood that I've sold on the market just from that very satisfying.
Grom's blood has had a similar meteoric rise, much like green foil, for much the same reason. There's tons of people wanting to do raiding, and if you're on the melee side of the coin, mighty rage
potions. Yep. And unlike with the changes to elixirs, mighty rage potions, they've a very short duration.
Yeah,
and that's never been changed.
That's a one and done. A one and done.
So you still need to make a metric buttload of those.
Yeah. but you still need them for flasks. I think there's some of the offensive reagents you need them for. However, another similarly, whereas Dreamfoil is involved in greater arcane protection potions, Grom's Blood is involved in elixir of demon slaying.
Yes. Now, and I believe it's three per.
It's 3, and I want to say 1 ghost mushroom. I think that's the
it might be.
The cost.
It might be. I don't remember too well, actually.
But I mean, that's that's an additional huge cost. And elixir of demon slaying, those last like 5 minutes, I think.
No, a little longer. I think they're 10.
Yeah, but they don't persist through death. I don't think they do. Or if they do, you're probably not going to get a second pull in if you wipe. So
yeah.
But they're useful because there's demonic bosses in Karazhan 40, and so that the price on them has also gone up, but the supply hasn't gone up.
Now,
so we're kind of back at square one.
There's a reason why we're talking about this, as important as it is, and this kind of brings us to the why we fight point of all of this. Why it's so important to talk about the economy, and it's because we want to protect it. Not from anyone trying to do any, nonsense like, again, market manipulation and whatnot. That's part of the game. What it really is about is making sure we're protected against RMT, real money transactions. People trying to buy gold, people trying to use real life currency to get an advantage over others.
That's a good point, because there's a couple things, much like the market economics of within the WoW world. Part of what makes real money transactions for gold profitable is the demand.
Mm-hmm.
And as things get really out of whack on any kind of a private server, there's going to be people that look at the cost of doing business and go, I don't got time for that, or I can't do that. And they will just go, well, I could spend this amount of money to get the gold, and then problem solved. Even though it literally makes the problem worse, that's, people, myself included, often think of things in short-term time frames. And so there's also a vested interest from the team to sort of beat back the economy a little bit and keep it tame. Like you do want like a little bit of gold inflation if you have more players on, but if you have less players on, you actually should expect to see some gold deflation, which I actually did see
it's
in the winter of this year.
I struggle to find some attachments between, people who have the real money transactions and the actual market itself, until I really saw how big GDKP had become. And this is kind of from the 2019 classic servers, in seeing how badly those servers were abused by RMT for the purposes of having more money in GDKPs. And for those that don't know, a GDKP is a raid run where you then bid on items with gold.
And RMT and GDKP are attached at the hip, because whether it's a wink, wink, nudge, nudge, everyone knows that they serve one another. You can't, in vanilla classic WoW, with some exception, right? You can't just walk up and just buy your best in slot gear. But if you get a level 60 tune and then go to a GDKP run and go with like thousands of gold in your pocket, well, then you can just buy everything. So you just made an additional step, right? And all you did was make more demand for gold.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's part of the reason why the team has been so vehemently against GDKP, because it's a trap that makes RMT more lucrative and more desirable for those seeking to exploit the servers.
Yeah, and then I just want to break it down a little bit further where the relationship between RMT and GDKP really harms a server. So let's say you have all of these gold farming bots that are on the server farming gold, and they have a lot of these liquid assets building up. Just these gigantic pocketbooks that aren't doing anything. They're really not necessarily like in the economy yet. So the economy doesn't feel this excess of liquid asset. Yep. Then you have someone who purchases that gold on a character, whether it's a new character or not, and then goes on a GDKP run. So not only do you have a character suddenly having this very large pocketbook that they've acquired where essentially it didn't exist beforehand, they're then spending that money on products, on consumables, on different items, then going on a GDKP run and unleashing that gigantic pocketbook on the server. All that money is then flooding out all of a sudden. It's creating instability. It's creating the ability for certain people to purchase things because it is, like you said earlier, where, you know, you're finishing a quest and suddenly, you know, the gold snaps into existence where it's just created. It's that on an immense scale. It destabilizes the entire market because it suddenly exists.
And it destabilizes it in a way that, and this is why many veteran players who see this are so against it. You know, for people that don't like fully comprehend, you know, what this really means is, let's say, you know, you work a full-time job, but when you're on your off time, you like to play WoW with your friends, you like to do a little farming, like to goof around, but you've been pretty frugal with your coin and you've been saving up for a while because, you know, you kind of want to buy this thing you saw in the auction house, right? Now, you put in a certain amount of effort to get that gold. Once you enter in something like a person with tons of money that just went into a GDKP, this destabilizing force on the economy will now make let's say you saved up 1,000 gold, right, to get something in the auction house you've been eyeing up. Well, now because there's so much more gold floating around, someone's gonna just snipe it, and more broadly, the gold that you have worked hard for is now worth less because there's a bunch of invisible, quote unquote, effort that was put out there that now just has this gold that's floating in the economy. So it actually hurts players' efforts, which is why I think so many veterans of the game are so against it, because they also see that and they've even witnessed it over time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. Now there is if anyone wants to look this up, there is an actual economic term for this, and it's called hyperinflation. Inflation and hyperinflation are very, very different things. Inflation is a very natural process that happens, and sometimes it hurts, sometimes it helps, but it's always these gentle slopes. Hyperinflation, when you look at an overall market's condition, it's very, very, very spiky. And it creates these immense differences in value and worth of a currency. There's a lot of countries you can actually look at over the last 30 years that have had to deal with issues of hyperinflation because their solution to problems has sometimes been, oh crap, we got to print more money. We got to print more money right now. We got to print more money. And it causes these massive long-term problems.
It does. And, you know, taking that context into the game, there's a pretty, you know, it's pretty easy to see that, you know, if 1 week, you know, a Black Lotus cost you 15 gold and you understand how much effort it took to get that, if literally the next week it cost 30 gold, well like that, like you can see how like that's a case of like a hyperinflation kind of thing happening where the cost of goods doubles over a week Like that's crazy. So you need to be vigilant against that because I don't think players want that, you know? And many of the veterans of the server had to deal with hyperinflation like situations in 2023 when the population went from like, an average of 1,500 concurrent online to, 10,000 and there's a queue.
10,000 with a 10,000 queue. Yep. I remember
Right.
that.
So that was sort of a crisis, but that's not something that happens every day, right? And so I think the market during that time, it went up by a good deal, but everyone could see why that was happening. There was just literally more players on the servers. So like it's to be expected. But these bots and things like that, they're largely more invisible and you don't really see them. And so one of the only ways you can detect them is by watching prices of items, which is why, I consider one of my duties to like keep track of things and, could be like, hey, this price is kind of getting out of whack. What's going on? And, I haven't seen anything quite as crazy as the summer of 2023, but
that was it was pretty bonkers. It was pretty nuts.
Yeah, I loved saying like, "Oh, I'm gonna go stream some Turtle WoW." I have a queue.
Oh no! and
Well,
just to kind of put a bow on this, this is not something that we can even discuss for vanilla or classic official servers because Blizzard does nothing. The fact that not just the Turtle team directly, but people like Vrograg, like yourself, and others care about it so much is the reason why we have this, I'm going to say semi-stable, because no environment is perfect, but it's why we have things as good as we do on Turtle.
Yeah. Yeah, and as long as there's people involved in the economy, nothing's going to be stable. But you don't want these forces ruining all the effort, all the love and care you have for your community. And that's why I think it's fair when the team says, we are heavily against RMT. And, if you see anything suspicious, help us report people that are harming your community. Because that's, in the long run, that's what they're doing.
Exactly. Oh boy, we covered a lot there. Again, some people are going to be like, they talked about money the whole time. Why?
Well, you know what the goblins say. Time is money, friend.
I almost hit it with the friend there. This was also admittedly Vrograg and myself being a bit self-indulgent. We're both numberheads.
Yeah. Like normally, I for one of the shows, I have to deal with Acalix, Nixxiom, he's talking about RP and stuff. I'm like, that's cool. I like RP, but could we talk about the market?
It's so important. Again, the market is something that affects us all on a daily basis. Every time any of us, and it sounds like I'm being like dramatic about this, but this is a fact of the matter. Every time any of us log in to Turtle, we are affected by the market. It is a part of our gaming life, our existence on the server. That's just a fact. And I feel like maybe we don't always appreciate that. Maybe
even the role-playing community, people who are in many respects more detached from like the PvE and PvP aspects of the game, like when there was a price point out for the guild tabard, something a lot of the RP guilds wanted, like they're like, how are we going to come up with 5,000 gold? like that was like even people that are more detached from the game in that respect, like it really does affect everybody who plays.
Everyone, absolutely everyone. And there's no way to state that any less. That's, again, just a fact of how the game functions. And again, where Turtle is not perfect. It's not.
No.
Perfection is never something that is going to happen. But this is better than what a lot of servers especially retail, have to deal with.
Yeah, and regulating economies is very difficult. And I think the team does more than most people are used to. And it's usually a pleasant surprise when they get to Turtle, when they see the prices of things, and they're like, they kind of go nuts. Like I've seen it multiple times.
That's a good way to put it. I feel like that's a really good kind of note to close on as well.
Yeah.
So, Vrograg, is there anything that you want to say in closing? And then after you're done with that, go ahead and give yourself the promotion, buddy.
Oh, sure. I would like to personally thank wowauctions.net. They're a great resource for anyone out there who wants to look into the market, wants to look into prices over time, that kind of stuff. I've worked with their main server dev, and I have been able to collect lots of information there. I wouldn't know as much as I do if I didn't plug them in some way, shape, or form. So check them out, wowauctions.net. And if you're looking to watch some of my content, you can check me out on YouTube. That's Vrograg Fishslayer. Just put it in the search and you'll find me. There's not many orc fishermen doing turtle wow content, so I got the SEO locked down.
More soon. Hopefully more orcs get into the fishing game sooner rather than later.
We'll see.
Now, normally Nixxiom would be here as well, but again, him and his wife just had a child, so taking a little bit of time off, as they should. So thank you again to them. Thank you again to Nixxiom. Normally he's here, just this week, this month, not. I hope
family comes first.
Yes, and I hope everyone is doing incredibly well after the birth of their child. With that being said, take a drink. That's part of the Pummel here, episode 3, economy edition, with myself and Vrograg. I've been Dan. You know who I am.
I've been Vrograg.
And we're going to get the heck out of here before any more people are like, they need to stop talking about money. So for all of us, thank you so much. Part of the Pummel closing out for the month of May. Bye-bye now.